Released back in 1995, a sample demo of the original Biohazard, or what would later be called Resident Evil, was released during the development process of the game. This demo showcased a lot of features leading up to the finalised product, but also had a lot of different elements in the game that wasn't included in the final release. There were certain features and scenarios that played out that weren't in the original game. As the process of this demo, and even with the development of the game itself, there had been multiple demos that had been released at different stages throughout its process. During the development stage, there were multiple demos that were released at different stages to document various different element changes to the gameplay. I have done previous videos on a couple of these other unique demos that were released as well, one mainly being a timed demo where you played as Chris. So I'll leave a link down to that video down in the description, and you can see the comparisons between the two, because in that demo you only had a limit of 15 minutes to complete the demo to try and get as far as you could, but also the item placements that we're all familiar with have all been changed around, so everything is in different places, so there's a lot of exploration to be had to figure out where to go and to see how far you can get in that time frame. This demo doesn't really have that as such. It has a lot of the interactive elements, but you don't really pick up any items per se. You do come equipped with your standard Beretta handgun, and you do later get a Colt Python in one of the rooms, but it's not in the usual place that you would expect it to be in. But as you can see from the visual style, as this was an early demo build of the game, you can see that there's a lot of unfinished elements within the graphical style of the backgrounds, as they were still tweaking things as the game went on. You can see that there was different camera angles, even down to the inventory screen was totally different from the one that we got in the original game. And even with the likes of the characters, you could still play as both Jill and Chris. They both had their own playthroughs of the demo, although the gameplay themselves in respect were very similar, as you had certain areas that you could explore, and then there was other areas of the mansion that was locked out that you couldn't access in the demo. But the main differences really between the two was the fact is that Chris had more inventory spaces compared to what was available in the final game, where he only had 6. Even among other differences, when you're interacting with certain doors and even the likes of the stairs in the main hallway of the mansion, you don't actually get the loading sequence where you're walking up the stairs. The screen just goes black for a couple of seconds, and then Chris or Jill will appear at the top of the stairs. And in other areas, the likes of even in the corridor where the dogs would usually break through the window for the first time, instead of having a dog you actually have a giant spider there instead. So there's definitely a lot of rearranged elements within the game. I know for myself, when I first played the demo, I got a shock when I didn't expect to see a lot of those enemies, because having played Resident Evil for as long as I have, when I've played it like for 20 plus years, you become very familiar with a lot of elements in the game, almost to a point that you can remember it almost like a religion, that you can nearly anticipate everything that's going to happen. But then when you go back and you play a lot of these early demo builds, it's not as straightforward as you think. There's item placements and there's things that are happening in different ways that you would never expect, and for that it definitely keeps you on your toes. But it also is a cool way to experience the game from a slightly different perspective, because you don't really know what to expect. So that in itself is really worthwhile experiencing. And even when I go back to my own personal experiences, not just from this demo, but I remember even going back to reading like gameplay magazines. I remember when I was first getting into playing the game, and even with the likes of Resident Evil Director's Cut when it was about to be released, there was a load of previews in magazines, or even articles in games magazines, that had screenshots of demo builds of the original game. And I can imagine that a lot of the footage and screen elements from even the likes of this demo build here would have been used in those magazine articles. So that in itself is pretty cool, because you'll notice the differences when you go into a lot of the rooms. Even the room that you go into where there's a big statue at the start before you enter into the hallway where you meet the dogs primarily for the first time, the whole texture layout and the design is totally different from what's in the final game as well. So you can see that there was a load of different stages. Now, for what it is, the gameplay in the demo was perfectly playable. It plays just like the original game. The character interactions and the way you can control the characters is no different to what is in the final game, and very similar to the likes of the original release of Resident Evil and Biohazard, you don't have any auto aim features, so you have to manually adjust your aim as you're moving through the different processes of trying to shoot enemies. Some of the big differences with this here is with the shotgun. Although you can use it against enemies, especially when you pick it up with Jill, you can't literally blow off a zombie's head by aiming the shotgun at its head. Instead, it doesn't really work that way. The head usually explodes if you just shoot it normal, but you have to wait for the zombie to just get close to you. So obviously that element wasn't perfected or added in until later on in the game's development. And even when you go out into the last area of the game, when you go outside into the area before you're about to go into the courtyard, instead of having a dog there, you have a hunter. But even if you manage to get the Colt Python, usually in most cases it would only be like one hit in the likes of Resident Evil Director's Cut to put a hunter down. But I remember in the original Resident Evil it would take up to 2 shots, sometimes 3, to put a hunter down. But in this game the damage effects for the Colt hasn't been upgraded, so it takes a lot more shots. It can take anything from up to 3 to 4 shots to destroy the hunter. So in most cases you're better off just to run past it and not to bother with it at all. And then in the final room, which you will see in a moment, you will have the snake that you will usually meet in the attic that will appear in this room rather than where he would usually appear in the final game. And that, even for myself, goes back to, I remember years ago when I go back to likes of mentioning the magazine articles, I always remember specific articles having screenshots of the snake appearing in this room. And I remember myself and my mates and my brother used to always talk about it a lot, and we were wondering, how is that even possible? We didn't realise at the time that that was based off an early development sample of the game, or an early demo build. But it was interesting to see those concepts, and we were kind of like keen, because we were so interested in trying to figure out all of the ways and intricacies about the Resident Evil game. We wanted to learn as much about it as we possibly could. So when you seen screenshots like that, it really got you thinking about what could have been or what the possibilities were. So to get to experience that demo years later is quite incredible, and in a lot of ways truly fantastic, because it brings you back to those moments of when you used to read those articles and all the discussions and the conversations you would have about what happens if this would have happened, or if this had played out, what would have happened. So that in itself is really cool, and to get to finally play it and see it in action for itself, even though the demo does end abruptly, but it does bring back a lot of those memories, which for me personally is really cool, because again, I do love Resident Evil. It's my #1 favourite game of all time, and quite rightly so, because I played it around the time when I was first introduced to the PlayStation, and it was one of the first games I'd ever played on the system. So to be able to experience a new console, but to get to play this game on top of that, was just absolutely mind-blowing. I never would have thought that it was even possible. Like, even coming back from days of playing the likes of the Sega Master System, the Mega Drive, Super Nintendo, and even my brother having likes of a Nintendo Game Boy and all of those type of consoles, which were awesome in their own right, but then to get to play the PlayStation, which was my first venture into 3D gaming, and then get to play Resident Evil within the first hour of getting to experience the console, was just incredible. So you were always looking for information, you were always looking to figure out things about the game, because I was just that into it. Myself, my brothers and my friends, we were just obsessed with Resident Evil, and we just always wanted to find out as much as we possibly could about the game. So we did dive into articles, we did dive into magazines whenever we could get our hands on any demos or anything that you had available to you, and you'd always try to have discussions and conversations about what could have been or what if moments, which was pretty cool. But that just shows the love that we have for the game, and I'm sure that a lot of you guys will agree, because I'm sure that a lot of you guys have your own stories to share. Some of you may have even played this demo or even had some sort of highlights around it, and you may know more than what I've been able to find out over the years. And I would love to hear your stories on this if you have played any of these early demo builds of Biohazard or Resident Evil, and if so, what are your unique experiences behind them? Did you get to play them at all? And if so, what did you learn from your experiences with them, and what was your take from seeing these versions of the game compared to the final game that we got released, when you seen the differences in terms of the elements, the assets that were available, even the likes of the level design with the textures on the walls? What are your unique takes on these demos? I'd love to hear them, so be sure to share it down in the comments below. So if you have enjoyed this video and you would like to see more types of videos on other types of unique demo builds of other games that were released on the PlayStation, I will make more videos on them whenever I can get access to them, so be sure to keep an eye out for them. And if you do want to see more gameplay style videos like that, be sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell to be updated when future videos are released. And if you'd like to see more gameplay of other demo builds of Resident Evil that I've been able to find on the PS1 over the last while, then make sure to check out the videos here, and and I'll leave links down in the description so you can also go and check them out, and you will be able to see the differences between all of the demos available for the game. So until next time, make sure to keep playing those classic games and enjoying them, and keep those gaming memories alive.